Thank you for joining us here at this press conference with the Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. We're delighted to have with us today the chair of the commission, Ms. Navanethem Pillay, and to my left, the fellow commissioner, Chris Sidoti, who are here to share with you the findings of their latest report. As you may know, the commission was established by the Human Rights Council in Geneva in 2021 to investigate alleged violations of international law in the region and investigate the underlying root causes of the conflict. This morning here in New York, Ms. Pillay presented the findings of the Commission's latest report to the General Assembly's Third Committee, and now they're here to answer questions from the media. So Ms. Pillay will start us off with the opening remarks, followed by Mr. Sidoti, and then we'll open the floor to your questions. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Todd, and good afternoon, everyone. I apologize if we were a few minutes late. They didn't provide an agenda item lunch for us. So we were scrambling around, so thank you. So let me begin by saying that in the preparation of our report, we're working in the middle of conflict. So it's really horrific as we watch the news, watch incoming news of ongoing violence, as well as track our own planned work. And every day we witness new horrific attacks on civilians and civilian objects in the Gaza Strip, including medical facilities. Attacks on medical facilities, as we said in our current report to the GA, and the complete destruction of Gaza's healthcare system was the main focus of this report. And we believe it's an outrage that such attacks are continuing unabated. And as we said many times before, an immediate ceasefire is the utmost priority and should pave the way for peace, justice, and accountability for all victims. In our October 23 presentation to the General Assembly that a year ago, we unequivocally condemned the killing of over 1,000 Israeli civilians by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups, injuring thousands more and taking more than 200 hostages, including children. We also condemned Israeli military attacks that resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians, including hundreds of children. In June 2024, we presented a comprehensive report and 2 conference room papers to the Human Rights Council, documenting some of the most egregious crimes and atrocities committed by Israeli authorities and Palestinian armed groups on and since 7th October 2023, including killing and maiming, siege and starvation, forcible transfer, sexual and gender-based violence, and attacks directed against civilian populations. So we continue to underscore the urgency for the parties involved to cease all forms of violence and to ensure that civilians are protected. We call for the immediate and safe release of all hostages. Civilians should never be used as bargaining chips. Our report to the General Assembly, which we presented this morning, examines attacks on medical facilities and personnel and the treatment of detainees and hostages from 7th October 23 to August 24. And we conclude that Israeli authorities have implemented a concerted policy to destroy Gaza's healthcare system. Our report also concludes that Palestinian detainees were subjected to persistent mistreatment by Israeli authorities, amounting to torture as a war crime and crime against humanity. And finally, the report finds that Israeli and foreign hostages have been intentionally mistreated by Palestinian armed groups in captivity, whose actions amount to torture as a war crime and crime against humanity. So just to say that we intend to continue pursuing the fulfillment of our mandate, including in relation to making recommendations, in particular on accountability measures, with the view to avoiding and ending impunity, and with the view of ensuring legal accountability, including individual criminal and command responsibility. And I also draw your attention to a position paper that we have established on our website, and that one fleshes out how the ICJ advisory opinion and its directions have to be implemented, what steps should be taken by member states, by organs of the United Nations, such as Security Council and United Nations. I don't know if you've accessed that document already. I'm personally pleased that it has been already read by many people, including some representatives of member states at this morning's hearing. Thank you, Chris.
When we were here a year ago today, I certainly didn't anticipate that we would be back now and this killing would be continuing. There has never been a period in this 100-year war in which the fighting has gone on for so long, resulting in the deaths of so many people. It is a period without precedent in a war that has been going for a century. We shrug our shoulders because the war has been going on so long, and it's understandable but regrettable that the impact of the killing of the last almost 13 months is lost on us as a result. I mean, the statistics are overwhelming. You know the statistics. I only want to give you one, or one set. Of all the killing that gets me most is the killing of kids. And I'm reflecting the fact that I'm a father, a grandfather, and in about a month I'll become a great-grandfather for the first time. Kids mean something to me. On the 7th of October, 38 Israeli children were killed, one of them under the age of 2 years. Since then, at least as of last week, 13,319 children have been killed in Gaza, of whom 786 were under the age of 1. And in addition, 165 children have been killed in the West Bank. Now, that's the only statistic I want to give you. And it's a statistic that, to me, says everything. Kids aren't terrorists. Kids aren't terrorists. And yet, between what happened in southern Israel on the 7th of October and what has happened since then, we have had thousands and thousands of kids killed. And that's not even including those who are injured, those who are under the rubble, those who have lost limbs. It's said that the amputations of limbs of children is the greatest in any conflict in recorded modern warfare. Kids who have lost parents. You know, I wonder when the current Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu talks about finishing off Hamas. I wonder about what the 1 million children in Gaza will be doing in 20 years' time. The conflict in Gaza is an Israeli terrorism creation factory. And there is no sign of it finishing. Navi has referred to the decision of the International Court of Justice. That is a landmark event for us lawyers, an extremely significant event to have a legal determination of the status of the current situation. And it's a way forward because it provides the basis upon which any peace discussions, if they ever occur, can be built. The law provides the foundation, and peace negotiations cannot alter that foundation. The foundation is the law. But that decision provides the foundation upon which bricks can be built. And I'm very pleased that our reports have contributed to the decision taken by the International Court of Justice. But I'm also acutely aware that our reports, the decision of the International Court of Justice, 4 resolutions passed by the Security Council in the last 13 months, resolutions part of the General Assembly, none of those have resulted in a single child not being killed. So we can take a lot of pride in the decision of the International Court of Justice, and we do. Member states of the Security Council can cheer because they have actually managed to achieve consensus on 4 resolutions, when mostly they can't. But regrettably, not a single child has not died because of all of these actions. And that's the reality that confronts the whole United Nations system today. That's all.
Thank you, both of you, for those opening remarks. Now we can open the floor to questions. If you would just please identify yourself and the media outlet that you work for. Please go ahead.
Commissioners Pillay and Sidoti, welcome back. Sherman Briceby, South African Broadcasting, and on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, thank you for coming to speak with us. Commissioner Pillay, you talk about a couple of imperatives, right? The need for a cessation of hostilities, a ceasefire, and also legal accountability. And as a judge that has served within the ICC, the International Tribunal on Rwanda, a High Court judge in South Africa, I wonder, High Commissioner for Human Rights, what does justice really look like? What does legal accountability look like here? You've delivered several reports. There are advisory opinions. There are provisional measures that have been handed down by the ICJ that are being wantonly ignored. And so when we talk about legal consequences here, what does that really mean in the context of judgments that have been handed down or slow-moving processes in the ICC, for example? People fear justice means nothing today. How do you see it?
Wrong question to ask a judge. I am very pleased that we've brought the focus of this situation under the law. Because for years and years, politicians have been handling the matter. In fact, some of the opposition to our report on and recommendations on getting an ICJ opinion that came from developed countries was that they're busy negotiating, and this referral to the ICJ will interrupt that. So I'll give you that as an example showing of the obstacles in the way of international justice taking place. But as a judge and a firm believer in use of the law to address any violations, it's a slow process, but we are getting there. And we're getting there mainly because of activism on the part of civil society and victims, and commissions such as us whom they approach and convey their anxiety. Not a single one of them would be prepared to drop justice and accountability from peace. To us, it's an imperfect system, the international justice system. You know, it's only about 30 years old. The ICC, where I sat as a judge and now as ad hoc judge on the ICJ. I do believe that this is one of the most important judgments because it's the first time that the court was given an opportunity to rule on the lawfulness of the occupation itself, which we identified as the root cause of the conflict. I see these as important steps and a game changer, because I see how that opinion has been welcomed on the streets, but appalled at how in this building, the United Nations, the behavior seems to be not to recognize that there is this ICJ judgment. This is why we prepared our paper, the position paper, which spells out that it's a responsibility of every state. It's their obligation under international law to take positive steps to end the occupation and promote self-determination. So this is different. It's an important step. It hasn't been achieved in 60 years. It's happened now because of the combined effort of Palestine requesting this commission. And above all, for the tremendous support that this commission receives from inside Israel. This is where our information comes from. We were able to hold a number of oral sessions where we held hearings, but now, because we're not allowed into Israel, we're not allowed into Palestine and Gaza, it's a bit difficult to actually speak to victims outside. Anything for Sharon? You said you had a number of questions? All right.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pillay. Okay, we'll take a question from the second row.
Thank you. My name is Ibtisam Azim, Al Arab Al Jadid newspaper. Good to see you back here again. I have a few questions, including follow-ups. You, in your answer, you said you talked about the positive steps to that countries should take to end the occupation. Could you elaborate on that? And in relation to that, also the issue of third country role in the war and genocide that's happening in Gaza, including countries that provide weapons to the Israelis, whether the US or other countries, their role and their obligation. And if you could comment on the UNRWA ban by the Israeli Knesset and how you see it as part of these efforts to within the war on Gaza. Thank you.
You know, when it comes to what steps can be taken to end the occupation, let's remember the ICJ said rapidly end the occupation. And the judges told member states, you have to distinguish, you have to change the way you've addressed this matter before. You have to change your attitude in the way you treat these two states, Palestine and Israel. You have to distinguish between them. So, you know, one is an occupier and the other are occupied. And the onus then lies on every state under international law to take steps not to cooperate with the occupation itself. And so, because that's the order, we then spelt out the various steps. You know, I don't have time to go through all those steps, but it's the clearest direction coming to every state that you have the responsibility not to continue to support this occupation, and that would be any support, you know, militarily, politically, or recognition, even about moving their embassies to Jerusalem. Every step that one can shine the microscope on comes under this. You have to change your traditional way of treating the situation. With regard to, you know, one of the things you said is the weapons transfer. Now, the Human Rights Council last June added 2 new mandates for this commission, and one was to investigate the transfer of arms from states to Israel, and the other is to identify settlers who are committing violations. And I'm really sad and disappointed to say that we can't even begin with those 2 mandates. We're expected to report in June next year. We can't because the funding has not been allocated as yet. And yet, I consider those 2 additional mandates are very urgent, and we have to begin work now. So with UNRWA, I'll hand that to you, Chris, yes.
The UNRWA decision, or the UNRWA legislation, has very serious implications because UNRWA is the principal deliverer of, or vehicle for the delivery of aid and assistance to Palestinians, and is also the principal service provider. There have been allegations made by the Israeli authorities about UNRWA staff. UNRWA has investigated and dismissed, as I understand it, 9 staff. I'm not UNRWA, you need to check that with them, but I think it's 9 staff. That's more than the number of staff that the Israeli Defence Forces have dismissed for violations of international humanitarian law, such as war crimes and crimes against humanity. UNRWA at this stage is doing far better than the IDF in dealing with allegations and investigations of misconduct by employees. And 9 staff out of in excess of 13,000, to be perfectly frank, is significantly fewer than what I would have expected. And UNRWA has acted. So the suggestion that UNRWA can be excluded because of some links with terrorism is not supported by any established facts at all. But the interesting contrast, though, the ironic contrast, is that UNRWA has saved Israeli taxpayers billions of dollars over the last 57 years. Billions. Because Israel, as the occupying power under the 4th Geneva Convention, is responsible for the care, protection and the provision of services to persons under occupation. Israel should have been providing hospitals, medical support, schools, universities, social security, employment programs, and it hasn't. The international community has been doing that by its financial support for UNRWA. So if UNRWA is kicked out, the cost for the Israeli taxpayer is going to be ginormous. So this is a decision that is bad for the Palestinians and ridiculous for Israeli taxpayers.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you again, to see you again. Abdel Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. Among your mandate is the root causes, and do you see some hypocrisy now, especially among Western states who thinks that history started on October 7? They try not to mention anything before, as if the conflict started that day. So how can you highlight the root causes, which deeply seated in the occupation, which lasted, as you know, many, many years, and the atrocities committed not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank? So how do you highlight that? My second question about the issue of the children, sir. If you hear the defense minister saying these are human animals, and some saying that we will cut off food, medicine, and water, that creates a culture that children, and one of them said, I can bring you the quote, when he said, there is no innocent Palestinian. If these babies and children grow up, they will become terrorists. And just let me see, today, a settler leader, she said she will establish new settlement in Gaza, and she said, the sound of bombardment in Gaza is like music in my ear. I am only worried if I don't hear the bombardment. So when you hear this statement and the incitement, I want to ask you if you include these incitement in your report, and that would justify killing 13,000 children with no eye blinking. Thank you.
I agree with you about the double standards in approaching in these halls, especially where member states deliberate. And that was the case this morning as well. You know, that tired old complaint was made by the states that I expected would say that, and that is that they oppose the formation of this commission because it's not time-bound. You see, I call that a tired old complaint, with thousands of children being killed. You know, I also have all these statistics of the deaths that have happened. It's quite hypocritical to make a speech about why we don't support you because you're not time bound. And I'm very happy that we're not time bound. We were able to investigate all these matters. We were on the ground. We were the first to address the situation even on 7th October. So my answer this morning to member states is yes, history didn't start on the 7th October. And that we have recorded again and again the huge violations that occurred historically, and its occupation. So it did come up, and I responded to that. You know, as a person who was a lawyer in the criminal courts for almost 30 years and a judge, as Sherwin said, yeah, I've yet to find people accused of crimes admitting that they find ways of denying the crime or diverting attention from that. You do not expect that at the level of member states' discussion. So I was surprised that it's still there. To avoid addressing the issues, tell us which fact is wrong, yeah? Give us your own statistics, let us in so we could see for ourselves. None of that comes up. So I'll just address that to say this commission is very, very well aware of the history. And, you know, I myself got educated reading the number of books. I don't know how we allowed what we can do about colonial powers. You know, we were victims in South Africa of British colonialism, and I see how long ago that started. All right, so as I said to you earlier, we stick to the law. We try to cut our minds off from the political dimensions, but even under the law, we're addressing the facts as something that happened long before 7th October. Your other question related to the children.
Could I just perhaps add one thing to Navi's answer on the first question? We have tried at all times to put events into a historical and a legal context. Both are important. In 2022, two years ago, when we reported to the General Assembly, we gave our analysis that the occupation was unlawful and indicated why we had come to that conclusion. And that was the occasion 2 years ago when we recommended to the General Assembly that a referral be made to the International Court of Justice to answer that question and the questions that flow from it. And that is very much the historical context for the 7th of October. Understanding and justification are two separate matters. And I always get anxious that people try to say that understanding a situation means justifying it when it doesn't. But it is impossible to understand the 7th of October without understanding the occupation and what that has meant. That doesn't justify what happened. We have made the legal context, having sought that understanding. The unlawfulness of the occupation does not justify the commission of crimes against humanity on the 7th of October. Nor does the commission of crimes against humanity on the 7th of October, commission of war crimes on the 7th of October, nor does the commission of war crimes on the 7th of October justify the commission of war crimes every day for the 2 years since then. So the historical context must be understood and the legal context must then be applied. On children, if I may go to your second question, the human animals part, and not just that, but an enormous number of other statements are directed towards the dehumanisation of Palestinian people, regardless of age, young people, old people, male, female, the lot. And we dealt with many of those statements in our report to the Human Rights Council in June this year. We went through the context. And we'll be coming back to those statements because we have much more legal analysis to do as to what the consequences in international law are for statements like that that have been made. We'll come back to that. But to revert to where I began, kids cannot go through what they have gone through in the last 12 months without it having an enormous impact on them for their entire lives. That is certainly the case physically for kids who have lost arms or legs or both. And we've met them. We've met them in hospitals. We've interviewed them. For them, this is a lifelong result. But the kids who are traumatised by the loss of parents, siblings, aunties, uncles, grandparents, cousins, who have experienced now 13 months of severe food deprivation, leading to a situation that is now described as acute malnutrition. These kids are going to have this impact throughout their lives. So, in one sense, I think some of these statements made by some of the Israeli extremists are correct, in that how these kids as adults are going to respond to what's going on should be troubling Israelis. But that's not the kids' fault. They can't go through what they have had to experience without this having a severe impact on them and their lives forever.
Okay, thank you. Another question on the left side.
Could you kindly give us the website where to find your reports?
I can share that with you.
And secondly, welcome, Madam Pillay. We haven't seen each other for a while. She was the featured speaker for the Dag Hammarskjöld Fund for Journalists several years ago, of which I'm still chair.
Okay, thank you. Take a question from the back. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. By the way, I hope I look that good when I'm a great-grandfather. I look this bad, and I got two young girls. A couple questions for you. Number one, I'm trying to absorb your assertion, fear, whatever you want to label it, about this next generation, you say, of terrorists, the terrorist breeding ground that Gaza will become. There have been wars before, and I don't want to compare them, but I mean, World War II, the destruction left in Germany, the destruction of Japan, these didn't lead to breeding grounds for a future generation of terrorists. So God willing, Gaza will emerge ruled by something other than an internationally designated terror group. Why do you, it seems like an assumption that Gazan children growing up today are going to be terrorists of tomorrow? Is that not a dangerous assumption?
Yes, it is a dangerous assumption, and there is one distinct, definitive, determinative difference between the examples that you cite. It's continuing, and there is no end in sight.
So when an end comes, weeks, months from now,
Weeks, months, this has been going on for 100 years. Weeks, months?
Gaza has been occupied for 100 years?
No, the war has been going on for 100 years.
As well for Israel. Well, for
Well,
75 years.
I'm not denying that for a minute. I'm saying this war has been going on for 100 years, and there is no end in sight. To help these kids, to help Israel, it's got to stop. Then there is a possibility. But until it stops, there is no chance.
It's an interesting take. In terms of the report itself, I want to gain some clarity because it seems like a Pandora's box. The assertion or the conclusion, one of them made in your latest report, is that anything that helps Israel carry out or continue to carry out what's labeled as an occupation needs to cease. Any assistance from member states. There's a few different ways of looking at it, and I want to clarify which way you're looking at it. Because one can say that anything that benefits settlements in Judea and Samaria, in eastern Jerusalem, where have you, that is helping perpetuate what you label as the occupation. There's another way of looking at it, where anything that goes into Israel proper, sovereign Israel, can be put into a proverbial slush fund to enable it to perpetuate this occupation. It's unclear from your report what exactly you mean by that. Can you please clarify?
The chair has given that one to me. First, yes, we have defined it as an occupation. So has the International Court of Justice. This is now a decision taken by the most authoritative judicial body in the international system. There ain't no higher than the ICJ. And there's nowhere else to go to get a higher opinion or even an alternative opinion. So the reason why we made the recommendation in the first place, because we said, well, we're pretty good. We're a commission of inquiry. We've got Navanethem Pillay as our chair. But we are a commission of inquiry, and this is a matter that, in our opinion, needed the authoritative decision of the International Court of Justice. And that body decided overwhelmingly, it wasn't a close thing, overwhelmingly, that the occupation was unlawful. So our opinion has been superseded by that of the most authoritative body in the international system. And it was the court that said that states individually and collectively have a responsibility not to aid or assist the continuation of the occupation, the maintenance of the settlements, the establishment of new settlements. The court left it to the Security Council and the General Assembly to put flesh on that ruling, that position. And our position paper is designed to do that. We first indicated that the court's decision applies to the Occupied Palestinian Territory. The court was asked about the occupation, and that was all, and it commented on the occupation, and that was all. The court did refer to the fact that there should be political distinctions made, that there are questions of economics and finances and militarisation or arms and arms trade and so forth, and we sought to elucidate that. In our opinion, the obligation not to aid or assist relates to the occupation and the Palestinian, and the Israeli settlements in the occupied territory. Where the complication comes in, relating to your question, is where it is not clear, or even more, where the Israeli authorities deliberately obfuscate what is done in relation to the State of Israel and what is done in relation to the occupied Palestinian territories. If, for example, there was one section of the military that was directed only to the defence of the State of Israel against foreign invasion, that part of the military would not be covered by the ICJ decision. But where the military as a whole is used in relation to the occupation, well, then the decision applies. If a state decides that assisting the occupation economically would be the consequence of trading in settlement products, then the state could decide not to trade in settlement products. But if the State of Israel were to stamp all products made in Israel without distinguishing between those made in settlements and those made within the State of Israel, that obfuscation would have much broader implications. So there is first a due diligence obligation on states to determine what aspects of their relationships either support the continuation of the occupation or the maintenance of the settlements, and what do not. And if there is a lack of clarity, then the due diligence obligation shifts to the State of Israel to make those distinctions. So what we have said in our position paper is very much that the court's decision applies to the occupation of the territory and the maintenance of settlements within the territory, but that requires examination of relationships to determine what does that. And if there is doubt, well, then it could be that the implications of the decision are broader.
One last
Sorry,
question.
sorry,
Can
I have to
get in
cut.
one more?
I'm sorry, I have to cut you off. We
Okay.
are running short of time. We'll
Yeah.
come to the front, and if we have time, we'll come back. Thanks.
Thank you. It's Margaret Bashir, Voice of America. Good to see you both back with us. If you could just go a little further on how you intend to achieve accountability and end impunity. I mean, in all reality, the United States will block any referral to the ICC and the Security Council of war crimes, because you spoke about war crimes in the report. So what venue, where will this accountability come from? Is it the ICJ? Like, where will you get it, and who will enforce it?
So obviously the commission, we're just a commission of inquiry. We don't have direct links with judicial organizations, but our mandate requires us to collect, preserve, gather evidence, and share that evidence for judicial adjudication. And by that they mean the ICC. They also mean national states carrying out universal jurisdiction. Where we play a role is, and I'm very aware about the standard of evidence a criminal investigation will require. With that in mind, we are working with the ICC prosecutor. We have a memorandum of understanding, and we are sharing information with them that would be useful for them in respect of Gaza. I think we said 500 pieces.
No, over 10,000.
Over 10,000 pieces of evidence have been shared with the court already. We shared information relating to the existence or proof of genocide with the South African legal team in respect of their application before the ICJ. And I announced that we will share information with any state or any judicial institutions that make similar requests to us. So that's the extent of our role. We're dedicated to gathering evidence with the goal of ensuring accountability. So it's a key role at the moment. There is no other organ of the UN with an investigative mandate. And actually, we are handicapped. We're not allowed inside the country, for instance, nor is the prosecutor of the ICC. As you know, many NGOs, I think 8 of them, were banned and described as terrorists because they announced that they were cooperating with the ICC investigation. So, for instance, that source has been closed to the ICC. So it's part of our mandate, and that's what we're doing. We will continue with the investigations, collection of evidence, verifying it. And for that, let me emphasize that we have the cooperation of the entire United Nations. All the various departments, OCHA, the SRC on sexual abuse, for instance, forensic evidence and satellite footage. So it's a good cooperation inside the UN, because it's very important that we verify everything we put in our reports.
In the third committee, you mentioned...
Can I just clarify something
Yeah.
first? Though? It doesn't require a reference from the Security Council. The International Criminal Court has jurisdiction because Palestine is a state party. So it doesn't have to go to the Security Council. The United States is not a state party, so the United States is irrelevant.
You just mentioned, Madam Pillay, that you wanted to get into Israel and they had blocked it. And you mentioned in the third committee that you wanted the Security Council to enforce your entry. How would they go about that exactly? I mean, a resolution, or how do you envision that?
This is a directive of the legal opinion that the ICJ has just delivered. One of it is the directing a UN investigative body to be allowed in, to be given access. So direct order to Israel from the court. And we feel, well, who can enforce that but the Security Council? It's their jurisdiction to ensure that orders of their court, the ICJ, are conducted. But we approach the matter as asking for the assistance of the Security Council to enable that to be done.
Thank you, Ms.
access.
Pillay. Okay, we'll take... Finished? We'll take a question from the front.
Yes, thank you. My name is Justisha Shupena. I'm a journalist from Namibia reporting for Eagle FM, but I'm also a Dag Hammarskjöld's fellow. So in light of your findings, what is the Commission's perspective on the future of peace talks on the occupied Palestinian territory between of course, Israel and the UN, given that Israel banned the SG from entering Israel earlier this month, and also the UN chief saying that Israel has been refusing to take calls from him since the 7th of October.
Well, these are unbelievable developments. Nobody has ever attempted to do that with the Secretary General of the United Nations. All states got together to establish the United Nations towards working for peace. And all the states are the ones who pass these laws and treaties and conventions. We have a situation where one state is not complying with that. It has happened in the past, such as apartheid South Africa. And one of the actions the Security Council, the General Assembly did, is to suspend South Africa's membership until it ended apartheid. So there are ways and measures they can adopt in respect of each situation to get the peace negotiations on board. Immediately we are calling for a ceasefire because the killings and the destruction is continuing. This commission is dedicated to using international law, so much more focused on justice and accountability, meaning you can't talk about peace separately from these issues.
Yes, sorry, I just have a quick follow-up in terms of the suspension. Would you say the UN will be in that position currently to suspend Israel's position within the UN, and will that be viable in terms of will it end the conflict within the area should the UN take that step?
You know, it's difficult for me to answer that question. I'm not a politician. I'm a commissioner dealing with the law. I've now brought this whole matter. The commission has brought this whole matter under international law and says to states, says to the Security Council and the GA, you have obligations to ensure that international law is respected. How they do it is a decision to be taken by member states. I gave the South Africa example, not for it to be copied here, but to say that when it suits them, these organs do act against states who are not cooperating with the international legal system. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I can make a comment on that, the Special Rapporteur spoke about that this morning. We as a commission, as Navi's expressed a view, I mean, I personally always support having channels of engagement and communication, even if they're not used or not used successfully. But, I mean, to be honest, it's the wrong question and we're the wrong people to ask. The question that your colleagues in Israel might ask is of Netanyahu, and that is, why do you bother? I mean, he calls the Secretary General an anti-Semite. We get called anti-Semites. There have been dozens of United Nations resolutions, including binding resolutions of the Security Council, that have been ignored. He comes here to the General Assembly like a 21st century Khrushchev, banging the desk. I mean, Monday he'll take his shoe off and start thumping it. UNRWA is being kicked out, called a terrorist organisation. 210 around about UNRWA staff have been killed. The question to ask is of the Israeli Prime Minister, why do you bother?
Thank you. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. Back to children. Do you think UNICEF and the Office of Children in Armed Conflict have actually done enough to protect children in Gaza? I haven't seen much statements from the latter office. And do you think the GA should take some steps to consider expelling Israel from as a member of the GA? Thanks very much.
I'll take this second question, and Chris will respond to children. As I've already said, our June report is totally focused on children and their protection, and we did receive the cooperation of other agencies who are working on the matter of children. So really huge concern, even from civil society. And your second question, sorry, was?
Expelling the
Expelling Israel
Yeah.
as a member of the General Assembly. Do you think steps should be taken?
As Chris and I are saying, yeah, we're the wrong people for you to ask that question. It's a decision from member states. Francisca is coming next, so you can ask ask her that. Yes, I gave that as an example to say if there is a will, they can take action, and because they've done these kind of actions in the past.
I've expressed my view on that already. Look, I have nothing but incredible admiration for UNICEF. I don't know how they are handling the current situation at all, or any UN agencies. UNRWA, OCHA, UNICEF, WHO, WFP. This is unprecedented. And even unprecedented compared to, say, the Syrian situation next door. When the war was raging in Syria, Syrian civilians could leave. Turkey accepted millions of them. Jordan accepted lots. There's not even anywhere that Gazan Palestinians can go. And so we have these UN agencies, including UNICEF, there struggling at great cost to the lives of their staff. It's not just financial cost, it's cost to the lives of UN officials. And I'm sure that maybe there are things that they could do that are more effective. We can always do things that are more effective, but I don't know what they are, and I don't know how they're coping at the moment. Beyond me.
Thank you. Let's take one question online from Jordan. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for taking my question, Madam and Mr. Many people believe that the war in Gaza did not start, actually started before 1967 when Israel occupied Gaza. It started when in 1948 Israel sent hundreds of thousands of refugees into Gaza. That's why it became the most populated area on earth. And many authors also believe, including the one who is talking, that the problem is not only occupation, the problem also refugees, how we can implement resolutions that related to the return or the right of return of refugees from Gaza, from West Bank, to their home, what is called now Israel, from Jordan, from Syria, from Lebanon. UNRWA, as you mentioned rightly, that is under attack because it's trying to maintain the status quo. But if we have solved the issue of refugees, maybe there will be no problem anywhere. What do you think? Thank you so much.
Look, the response is very brief. We know the issue. We haven't had a chance to look at it yet. It's simply not possible at the moment to look at every single issue that arises in the course of the current conflict. But it's on our list and we have to come to it at some point. Perhaps next year we'll have an opportunity to look at that if the current crisis is less than what it is currently.
You mentioned the right of return. We were considering doing a full report on the right of return, but personally, I think that even that is academic now. If you look at the legal opinion of the International Court of Justice, they talk of restoration of land. They talk of dismantling laws that were obstacles to self-determination. So to me, the right of return falls well within that. There's already ground laid for it. But our promise is we will address that issue. I was personally very shocked that it became such a hot potato during the Durban Racism Conference and long after at the review conference where I was the High Commissioner, that document mentioned the right of return, and therefore Israel and very many European states boycotted the review conference. And I kept looking at the document and say, where does it even mention right of return? So you had a real stretch of imagination and interpretation where that was brought in. So if that is such a hot potato, we will address it specifically. However, it is still my view that half the objections have been now removed if you study the opinion of the ICJ. I don't know if you agree with that. Right.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pillay. Thank you, Mr. Sidoti. Unfortunately, we're out of time. There's another press conference coming up right now, so thank you all for joining us. Have a good day.
Thanks.